Hello and welcome to the InPublishing Podcast, bringing you weekly insights into the newspaper and magazine publishing sector. I'm Ciar Byrne, and this week my guest is Katie French, editor of the Basingstoke Gazette and Andover Advertiser. Before we start, we would like to thank our podcast sponsor, ATEX. ATEX provides software solutions to newspapers, magazines, and online publishers worldwide. Its products include Desk, a content management suite with flexible options for efficient digital and print publishing, and cross-advertising, a cloud-based solution providing end-to-end multi-channel advertising management. For more information, go to atex.com. Our guest today is Katie French, editor of the Basingstoke Gazette and Andover Advertiser. Katie is the Gazette's first female editor in its 140-year history, and she's been in her role for less than a year. But she's already overseen significant increases in web traffic, spearheaded NewsQuest's national Thank You NHS fundraising campaign, and crossed swords with both the Hampshire Police and the Liberal Democrats. Katie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You've been described as having a great nose for a story. What's the secret of unearthing good stories? And how can you tell when a story merits further digging?
Firstly, that's a lovely compliment. And I guess really it all comes down to listening. I think all journalists have different strengths. They might be good at looking at data. They might have a great contacts book. But the one thing that I see constantly in really good reporters is just having that listening skill and being able to listen out for stories. It might be that you call a contact for one thing, and then they give you some information on something else. It's just about being receptive to what people are saying and being able to listen out for things.
Great advice. Now, sorry to come on to the inevitable straight away, but what has been your experience of editing a local newspaper during the current coronavirus pandemic?
It's been completely unusual and something that I don't think any of us could have ever foreseen. I thought I'd lived through, a couple of really exciting general elections and Brexit, but this really has been life-altering, really. We got in there quite early on in terms of working from home. So from the beginning of March, I decided that the team should work remotely for our health and safety reasons. And at first I was slightly worried about the changes, going from working in a buzzing, vibrant newsroom and to being a little bit disjointed. I wondered how that will play out, especially on deadline day. But actually, we've actually found that it works quite well in terms of readjusting work-life balance for some of us, because we've got extra hours in the morning, we're not commuting. So it's been an interesting adjustment, and I'm sure newsrooms up and down the country are having similar problems or similar success stories right now.
And has it affected your distribution? Because obviously it's harder for people to pick up a paper when they're out and about.
Yes, it has, sadly. I'll be completely honest about it. It has completely affected newspaper sales. We've seen a fall in advertising revenue. So I think it will recoup. I'm naturally quite an optimistic person. And I think that once we return a little bit more to normality, more people will be going out to shops again, and they'll naturally be picking up their papers on their travels. But there's no secret about it. It has definitely hit our industry pretty hard.
Well, I'm going to come on later to the partial paywall that NewsQuest has introduced. But still sticking with the pandemic, how have you been covering the pandemic in terms of the stories that you've been running?
So we've been covering it in quite a broad strokes way, really. We've been looking at the local hospital and the healthcare provisions, care homes, also looking at the community and the community's response. I think people maybe have reached a point where there is a certain amount of fatigue around some aspects of the story now. So it's all about, keeping it, making sure that it's informative, and also stuff that people want to read and engage with. Quite early on, we got the story about a lack of PPE at the hospital here in Basingstoke, and that almost kick-started a bit of a conversation about the lack of provisions. So we're doing everything really, from health stories as well as the day-to-day journalism, like court and crime and that kind of thing.
And can you tell us a bit more about the Thank You NHS fundraising campaign, which I believe you've coordinated on behalf of NewsQuest titles nationally?
Yes, yeah. So early on, I recognised that this was an opportunity to do some good as well. I think there was a real public need to see some positive action as a result of this horrific and ongoing story that we're all living through. And I came up with the idea of raising money to give to NHS charities together. And I've been leading the national group effort, and some papers we've got 168 titles around the UK, I should say, and a very broad range of titles from the Northern Echo to the Oxford Mail. And the idea behind this campaign was, if people didn't want to raise for the NHS charities, there might be a local cause instead that they could get behind. And in total, we've raised around £267,000 at last counting for various different causes. And I think it's just a really good, it's nice to do something nice as well as reporting, such a challenging story. So
That sounds like a really great scheme. Um, I want to wind the clock back a bit now and talk about how you first got involved in journalism. I believe that you edited the student newspaper at Plymouth, and that while you were there, you made waves by exposing university disability cuts. What did you learn from that experience, and what would your advice be for today's student journalists?
I think I would always say, if there is a student newspaper where you are, you're really lucky, first of all, because many of them have closed over the years. So do get involved in student press. It's such an amazing training ground. I had completely free reign as the editor in my final year. I had no formal journalism training, so it's quite terrifying when I look back and think, we really were coming up against some quite powerful forces in terms of the university's communications team, and also the student union. But it's such a good training ground. Every day you're doing something different. We took it very seriously. Those are my final year, almost like a full-time job. And I probably spent more time on my student newspaper than I did doing my dissertation. But yeah, it's a great experience, and it's definitely one that you can't do anywhere else. So I definitely say make the most of it.
And then you started out in local newspapers and then went to work for a couple of national newspapers before returning to the local newspaper sector in your current role. What differences have you found between the two? And does your heart lie in local journalism?
So I obviously started off in local news, and I always knew at some point I wanted to go to London and work for the Nationals. Um, and I'm really glad that I did. I learned so much at Mail Online, and from my stint at the Telegraph as well. It's a different kettle of fish at a national level, and it really does, give you an idea of how to lead a conversation and how to tap into what your readers are interested in. When this opportunity came up in local press, I thought it would be a great shout. Essentially, I wanted to go back into local news. I knew I wanted to go in at an editor's level, just really because I know that local news can give you so many opportunities in a way that you'd have to work for another decade in nationals to get to the same point. I love local news. I think it has a really important place in society, and I'm very happy in local news. I see myself staying here for a long time, hopefully.
Great. Um, Now, in the last year, the Basingstoke Gazette website has seen a huge increase in web traffic. In April, I believe you reported 1.7 million page views, which was up from 430,000 the previous year. And when you took the helm last July, you decided to shift to a digital first newsroom. Why did you feel that was the right thing to do?
I When I took over the job, I had a look at the existing output, and I think I came up with a bit of a strategy for how I wanted the paper to move into the next kind of stage. And it was very much a paper-based operation, and it was very good at doing that, but it maybe neglected the online audience somewhat. And I essentially identified an opportunity to improve it really, and just to build upon the existing audience there. I think it's really important that as we move towards different methods of getting news or different ways of getting news, that publishers do embrace online and don't see it as a negative or a different entity, because ultimately our readers are all online, essentially. Most of them, we get 30,000 readers a day now, and our paper is around sort of 6,000 people a week. So we do have to, go where the audience is and also build upon that, because if we are unsure about the future of the print market, it makes sense to focus online.
And what does a digital first newsroom mean in practice? What changes did you have to make?
So the main shift really was getting reporters to think about stories and journalism first, and not think about the paper structure. So previously, we're a weekly paper. Previously, there'd be a flurry of activity on a deadline day, and then things would tail off and then slowly pick up again at the start of the week. Whereas the whole point about a digital first newsroom is that you're immersed in the news and you're reporting every day. So although I call it digital first, it's actually journalism first in many ways, because you're focusing on reporting, and the paper then almost fills itself off the back of it. So it was almost sort of freeing reporters from the worries about filling a paper, and letting them go off and explore and go out and find stories and get under the skin of local pressing issues.
And were there any challenges that you faced in doing that? And would you have any advice for other newspaper editors, local newspaper editors, thinking of doing the same?
I think it's always a challenge when you try and change a way of working, and you have to get buy-in from the reporters, and they have to really love the job. I think my advice would be just to be transparent and honest with what you're trying to achieve. But actually, one reporter said to me that he was considering leaving to go and join a daily, but then I turned up, and he said that it suddenly felt a lot more like a daily newsroom, and it was exciting. And I think if you can kind of build that excitement and that buzz, it can be quite infectious and contagious. So I just say be really positive about what you're doing, and show people why you're doing it.
That's quite a compliment, isn't it? Now, I touched on before that a number of NewsQuest newspapers, including, I believe, your own, recently introduced digital paywall after a certain number of articles. Can you tell me a bit more about the thinking behind that?
Hmm. So as you know, we've been hit very hard by the coronavirus pandemic, in terms of as we've just discussed, in terms of ad sales and newspaper sales on the newsstands. And the digital subscription service is really a way of sustaining our business for the future. And it's a very reasonable paywall or digital subscription service. It's 40 articles for free a month when you register. And then if you are reading us more than 40 times a month, you asked if you could contribute. I think it's £4.99 a month or £52 a year. And the reason behind this is really, as we move towards the future, and we do see continued print decline, we need to find a way of monetizing ourselves online and making ourselves profitable. So that's kind of the thought behind it, really.
And what sort of a response have you had so far?
So it's actually been surprisingly positive. Of course, we've had a couple of people who are confused, which I completely understand, because for years they've got this product for free, and now they're being asked to contribute. And that message can be confusing to convey about why you need local journalism and why we need the public support. But I have found that at each stage, when I engage with people who do have a negative perception, I have been able to win people round. And I think it's just about being transparent with people and saying, look, we really need you right now. If you like your local press and you like what we do, we really need your support, whether that's picking up a paper or taking out a digital subscription.
And do you see a time when most of your news might be behind a paywall? Do you think that you might take it further and bring it in sooner than the 40 articles? Or do you think that's a model that's working?
I think this model is working. I think it's the best of both worlds, because your your people can get their content for free, and all of our coronavirus coverage will always be in front of the paywall, sorry, because we believe that it should be. And I don't envisage it changing anytime soon. I don't think there's much to gain from changing it. I think you have to introduce these things slowly and in a measured way, and at each stage be very transparent and honest with the readers about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Now, on a different note, you recently crossed swords with the Hampshire Constabulary. You accused their press office of putting obstacles in your way and even of trying to beat you to your own stories. What was the issue there?
It sounds really bad when you put it like that. The issue is, I guess it's not so much an issue. I think all local newspapers will come up against conflicts sometimes with their local authorities that they cover, and we're no exception to that. I've got great sympathy with the press office at Hampshire Constabulary. I know that they're a small team and they cover a vast area. I think my issue is when I just find it quite sad in a way that detectives and sergeants and police officers are discouraged from talking to the press and building up organic relationships, and everything does have to go through the press office. And we did have a couple of occasions where we might put in a media request, and instead of getting a response, we would see a post go up on Facebook, and it's sometimes that's slightly disappointing. Obviously, as an editor, when we're after a story and we get essentially scooped by the authority we're trying to cover.
Did they listen to your complaints?
We did have a bit of a discussion about it, but I think, it's just business as usual, really. They're pretty thick-skinned, I think, and they accept that sometimes there'll be things that we're not happy with, just as it is the other way round.
And how would you like to see that relationship change if it could be improved on?
I think I would like to see more of an open line of communication with things that are going on. And I know I just mentioned this, but I would like to see officers and members of the police force actually allowed to have relationships with journalists again, because they're actively discouraged not to talk to the press. And I can completely understand from a communications point of view why you might think that's a good idea, because you're controlling the message. But in reality, you're stifling news, really. And at the same time, officers are being encouraged to tweet about what they're up to. And I think if they can tweet, surely they can talk to a local reporter. But maybe I'm a bit old school.
Yeah, I was saying not like the old days. Now, another group with whom you had a bit of not a confrontation, but you criticised them, was the Liberal Democrats in your area, because during the last general election, they brought out some campaign literature which seemed to be disguised as a local newspaper. I know they did this in several areas, actually. Can you explain what happened in your area?
Yeah, so I was made aware of the fact that there was a free newspaper, the Mid Hampshire Gazette, being circulated in our circulation area. And to look at it, it had a front page headline, it had a picture, a story, it had this big masthead which said the Mid Hampshire Gazette. And in very small print, it said printed by the Liberal Democrats. And I took umbrage to this because it was in our circulation area. It was trading off the trusted format of a local newspaper. And it was really disappointing to see a party that had been so vocal on fake news essentially peddling something of that nature during the campaign. So I wrote a little something about it, and it got quite a lot of pickup. The Society of Editors and the NMA came out condemning the practice, and it was since found out that all of all of the main political parties were doing similar things. Um, but yeah, so it was quite an interesting time. And interestingly, there were a couple of Politico or sort of reporters or lobby correspondents that sort of said, "Oh, this has always happened." But my argument is, just because something's always happened doesn't give it, carte blanche to continue into the future. It's clearly not a good practice to be doing, especially in a heightened era of fake news and that kind of thing.
Well, I was going to come on to say, what impact do you think that sort of campaign tactic has on the regional press when perhaps public confidence in journalism is not as
Mm.
high as it should be anyway?
Yeah, exactly. I think it doesn't do a good service to the public. It makes us all look bad, frankly, and it reflects really badly on the political parties as well. But I don't think they'll be repeating it again for the next general election. But we'll have to see.
So, looking into the future, obviously we're in really strange times at the moment. But what are your plans for your titles?
Moving towards the future, I think we've obviously just rolled out our digital subscription service, so we'll be building on that and trying to, reach out to as many people as possible to get people on board. I'm hoping to continue the success online that the Gazette's had. We've also got a couple of campaigns running. We've got a campaign trying to stop a housing development being built on a historic piece of land. and we've got another campaign trying to stop libraries from being closed. So we've got our hands full at the moment. I think we're just going to be working on those issues and keeping an eye on other things that crop up.
And what are the challenges that you feel you're facing, particularly in the current climate?
I think the main challenge will be trying to get the public to get behind us in terms of taking out digital subscriptions or returning to buying us when this is. I don't think this is definitively going to have a moment where it's over, but when we do start to see a return to normality, I think we do need to be quite vocal in, making sure that the public know that we're still on the newsstands and we still need to be bought.
And do you feel that in a way the coronavirus pandemic has helped to restore some public trust?
I think it has. I really do. I think polling of trust in journalists, especially local journalists, looked like it had improved recently, which is always nice to see. Um, we've definitely had a lot of positive feedback from people, which is really lovely because, as you may or may not know, social media can be something of a cesspit sometimes for opinion and negativity. So when someone reaches out to say, thank you for this, you've really done a good job here and we really appreciate the coverage, it does mean a lot. So I think that in some ways it has restored the public's faith. We've also seen throughout the pandemic there is really a strong demand for local news, and that has been reflected in the web figures and the traffic, which was up to sort of quite stratospheric figures in March. So I think that does show that people do turn to people like us in times of need.
And can I just ask about the wider local newspaper sector as well? How do you think the regional press will evolve over the next 5 years?
I think the regional press over the next 5 years, it's going to continue to adapt to online, I think. And I think we'll be seeing more newsrooms adopting digital first strategies. And I think 5 years, I think people have before written off the printed copy a bit too early. And I think hopefully we'll see something of a renaissance period for local papers.
And will coronavirus change the sector irrevocably? Do you think that it's going to change the way that we report, the relationship, as we've already touched on?
It will, for sure. I think it will change how newsrooms operate. I think we'll probably see fewer publications return to their offices for quite some time, just because remote working does work. And I think it might see shifts in terms of people going in less and maybe having a bit more of a working from home split of the office. I think in terms of stories, I think health is definitely going to be top of the agenda, certainly for the next couple of years. And I can't see that changing.
And in terms of your own team, you did say that that's actually worked better than you thought working
Hmm.
remotely. But are you missing that newsroom buzz?
Yeah, I think there are definitely some days when it would just be lovely just to be in the office together, so you can thrash out, stories and angles together rather than doing it over Zoom or WhatsApp. Yeah, I do miss it. I think you can't replace that buzz of working together and having, the television on and watching things as they come in. But I think we are all making do at the moment. I haven't gone stir crazy yet, which is a good thing.
That's great news. And finally, you seem to be very passionate about investigative journalism. That's shown throughout your career. Outside of your own organisation, which investigative journalists do you most admire?
I think we're really lucky in the UK because we have such a strong investigative we have so many strong investigative journalists from across the board. I think I really admire Heidi Blake at BuzzFeed, who's done some amazing stuff on Russia and Russian intelligence. Claire Newell at the Telegraph, who broke the Philip Green Me Too scandal. I think there's a lot of people to look up to in this country.
And are there any big stories that have been broken in recent years that you wish you had been responsible for?
I've just finished reading Ronan Farrow's book Catch and Kill, which was all about how he broke the Harvey Weinstein story. And that was such a major moment in terms of our culture here in the UK and also in the US. And I think being a part of a story like that would just be, is something very career defining that I think we could all aspire to do.
Well, hopefully some story like that will come into your patch someday soon.
Who knows?
Thank you very much, Katie, for joining us today and giving us some really interesting insights into the local newspaper sector. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to thank ATEX again for sponsoring this podcast. If you would like to discuss how ATEX can help you with either your content or advertising management, then check out their website at atex.com or contact Alberto Mari, their Head of Business Development, on 07500 433 157 or by email at amari@atex.com. Thank you very much to Katie for being our guest this week. Her newspapers can be found at basingstokegazette.co.uk and andoveradvertiser.co.uk. You can also follow Katie on Twitter at JournoKatie. You can find out more about InPublishing and register to receive our magazine and newsletter at inpublishing.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week on the InPublishing Podcast.